My name is Brandon Lehman. I'm 28 years old. I'm an entrepreneur and investor, and this is how I became a Trump supporter. I was recording a video just before this, and I stopped midway and I thought to myself, since I started making YouTube videos, I haven't once told my audience who I am, why I see the world the way that I do, and how I became who I am today. I realized I want to be more than just a talking head on YouTube. I want to be somebody who my audience knows, understands, and has a deep connection with. I think by knowing my story, understanding my thought process, and knowing how I form my opinions, it'll enhance the experience for my now almost 190,000 subscribers. I'm gonna give you guys my entrepreneurial backstory and my personal backstory because each plays a pivotal and significant role in shaping who I became. So I've always been a very entrepreneurial kid, somebody who enjoyed hard work. From mowing lawns to shoveling driveways to selling candy at school, I enjoyed working hard and making money. When I was 14 years old, I pursued my first ever serious endeavor, which was making Call of Duty video game commentaries on YouTube. I was very passionate about this, spending 14 hours a day producing videos. I got my channel to around 10,000 subscribers, and I was making a few $100s per month playing video games as a 14-year-old. I was getting sent video games several weeks early, which was the biggest bragging rights I could possibly have as a 14-year-old boy. But more importantly, this whole adventure showed me for the first time and at a very young age the rewards that one could get from working hard and being passionate about something. At about 15 years old, I transitioned into becoming a rapper. Now, I did this for the rest of high school, and I took a lot of the lessons I learned from doing video game commentary about how to build a brand online and implement it into this musical endeavor. I was very successful. I had several music videos that had hundreds of thousands of views. I made several albums and mixtapes. I made sweatshirts. I did shows. And it was the first time that I really pursued entrepreneurship in a more industrious way. I was connecting with major artists. By the end of high school, I was engaging in some pretty serious level music business discussions. So this whole journey reaffirmed what I learned on my first endeavor, that if I work hard, I'm committed, and I'm passionate, I will be successful. And this instilled a level of confidence in me that has not left since. Music didn't end up working out. So right after high school, I got a job selling knives for Cutco. And this was the start of my transition into more serious business. My grandfather bought me a suit. He said I could not go into people's houses looking like a slob. And I will never forget the first time I put on the suit, put on a tie, looked at myself in the mirror and thought, wow, I look serious. I look professional. I really like this. And in that summer, I ended up becoming one of the highest selling sales reps for the Central Illinois area. And it was the first time that I developed an actual serious, tangible business skill that I could identify, which was sales. After that, I went to an event at the University of Illinois where in an auditorium were people from all different majors, marketing, engineering, computer science, business. The goal of this event was to pitch startup ideas, and students from various skill sets could partner and team up together. I pitched an idea for an app called Keep Up that allowed freshmen and international students to navigate this brand new university environment easily. I partnered with a brilliant Chinese computer science student who pushed me to achieve new heights I didn't even know I had within myself. Every meeting I would show up thinking I was prepared in my suit, and he would say, okay, yeah, this is fine, but what about this thing? Did you think about this? And I would say, oh, no, I didn't. And I would come back to the following meeting and I would say, I thought about the thing you mentioned, look. And he would say, okay, that's fine, but did you think about this? And I would be like, oh, no, I didn't. Then the next meeting I would say, hey, I thought about that thing. I worked that out. And he would say, okay, well, what about this? And that process of consistently pushing me to be better, to think deeper, was instrumental in my later growth. My partner's best friend was a guy who was about 25 at the time, and he owned a business on the University of Illinois campus, and him and I got very close through this process. We ended up starting a marketing agency called Market U. I was the director of sales, and I was thrilled to use my sales knowledge to be able to go out and get us business. One of the ways that I did this was going to local Chamber of Commerce events. Now I'm 19 at the time, wet behind the ears, and here I am at a Chamber of Commerce event filled with 40, 50, 60-year-old people. And my job is to go out and get new business. And this is where I learned one of the lessons that contributes significantly to why I became a conservative. I realized navigating a room full of 60-year-old white people that they didn't care that I was black. It was never a barrier. I provided a high-quality service that could improve these people's business, and they wanted what I was selling. I never got funny looks. I never got funny treatment. All I did get was $10,000, $20,000 checks from these people. They loved to be around me. They introduced me to their friends. They invited me to events. They treated me with respect and dignity because I was valuable and presented myself in a professional and respectful way. Market U did its thing. My partner ended up moving to San Francisco, starting a real estate video agency that's now doing huge numbers, $8-9 million a year. Because I lived in a college town, I had this crazy idea for a business that would do shoe cleaning. Students were always walking, biking, riding on buses, at the dirty bars every day. They had disgusting sneakers. So my high school friend and I, we started this business, and almost instantaneously, it took off like a rocket ship. I implemented all of the social media strategies I learned from running Market U and combined that with my mastery of sales to create a business that was cleaning over 5,000 pairs of shoes per month. We partnered with all the frat and sorority houses, the dry cleaners, apartment complexes, hotels. We created a market out of thin air that never existed before and became part of people's weekly habits, much like a haircut. You would go out Friday, Saturday, and then you would call Shoe Refresh to come pick up and clean your shoes. Professionals used us for their dress shoes. Women used us for their boots. We were chugging along at rapid pace. It was at this point that another one of my mentors heavily suggested that I start to get invested in real estate. I always thought real estate was a slow, old man's game. I was more interested in the fast-paced environment of entrepreneurship. But thankfully, he convinced me. I tried my first flip at the age of 21, and I was hooked ever since. As Shoe Refresh kept making money, I was getting more and more experienced in real estate investing, meeting amazing connections through that. And then COVID hit. COVID sent all the students away from the University of Illinois. They wouldn't be returning after spring break, and that was a huge hit to my business. So my partner and I, we decided to pivot into wholesaling luxury sneakers. See, we established connections in Los Angeles of people who could supply us with all of these exclusive shoes. And we sold some of these shoes out of our shoe cleaning business, but it wasn't something we ever did at scale. So what we decided to do was become middlemen between these suppliers who could get us as many shoes as we needed and these shoe stores across the Midwest that needed as many shoes as we could provide. This would turn out to become one of the best decisions I had ever made. This was around the time that me, my partner, and my little brother decided to move to Los Angeles. This was around August of 2020. Once we got to LA, we ramped up the shoe wholesaling business, and I ramped up my real estate investing business. All of this money I was just reinvesting into real estate, more flips, more rentals, more apartments. I also would use this money to invest in various private businesses as an angel investor. So all these lessons taught me three main things. One, the American dream is real. Two, anybody can do it, no matter your race, no matter your gender, no matter where you came from. And three, I hate paying taxes. Now to my personal side. I was born in Champaign-Urbana. My mom is black, my dad is Jewish. I grew up in a very loving household. From the time I can remember, my family would tell me I can do anything. I can be anything. I am special. The world is mine. And that level of love and support and instilled optimism created the ambitious risk taker that I am today. My grandfather was a professor at the University of Illinois, primarily an anthropologist, but he also had PhDs in linguistics, cognitive science, mathematics, and physics. Brilliant man, but his field of study was Southeast Asia, primarily Burma, Thailand, and southern China. On two separate occasions, when I was 10 going on 11 and when I was 13, he took me for 3 months with him and my grandmother to southern China and Burma for field work. Now, this is arguably one of the most important foundational moments of my life. I loved these trips. I was so open-minded. I was so excited. And today they are still some of the best memories of my life. But more than anything, what I gained from these trips was an unparalleled perspective into how lucky we are to live in America. His field work took him deep into the jungles, 12, 14-hour bus rides from the cities. So not only did I get to see the bustling metropolitan area of China, but I also got to see the primitive villages littered throughout the countryside. I saw how much people were struggling. Everywhere I would go to in China and Burma, there's orphans begging for money at the bus stop. There are starving people on the street. There are people with genetic mutations that we can't even fathom here in America, just laying on the sidewalk. There is misery and sorrow and destitute everywhere. I saw what real problems look like, what real struggle looks like. In America, there are no starving children. There's government assistance food stamps. There's free lunch programs at school. There are food banks everywhere. And worst case scenario, Child Protective Services will come and take that kid if the parent cannot feed them. In China, in Burma, in the rest of the third world, there are starving orphans everywhere. Anyway, this granted me a foundational perspective that to this day keeps me optimistic and happy and joyful every day that I wake up, because I understand how lucky I am to be born in the greatest country ever. I understood no matter what hardship I faced in life, it was always better than the alternative. No matter how hard things got, I was lucky. And that kind of optimism and perspective led me to be a successful entrepreneur, because every time I failed, every time there was a setback, I took it in stride with a smile on my face, because I had perspective. No problem is ever that serious. I lived a comfortable middle-class life up until the point I was about 13. Then my family went through an incredibly rough time financially. We moved from a nice big house to 5 people living in a 700 square foot 2-bed, 1-bathroom house. And this moment was also fundamental in my development, because it granted me a perspective that I didn't have, which was a hard life, seeing my parents stress like I'd never had, and knowing exactly why I wanted to work hard to improve my circumstances, to never be back at that point again. But I didn't give up. I didn't sulk. Coincidentally, this coincides with right when I started my first venture, the video game commentaries. It inspired me to dig deep, get creative, find solutions. And even though my life got objectively harder, the luxuries that I was used to went away. I didn't complain, because I had the perspective from those trips with my grandparents about, even though it's bad now, there is a whole other level of worse that it could be. So my entire entrepreneurial journey starts at objectively the lowest point in my life, leading to my belief that even if you're down and out, even if you don't have an abundance of monetary resources, if you have grit, if you have persistence, if you have belief in yourself, if you have resourcefulness, you can be successful, and nobody can tell me otherwise. Now let's get into how all of this leads to me supporting Donald Trump. So my entire family are liberals. You know, I was a huge fan when Obama won in 2008. I mean, I was 12. It was a big moment. I was actually a Bernie Sanders supporter in 2014 when I graduated high school. My girlfriend at the time's dad was a huge Bernie supporter, so I would watch a lot of Bernie's speeches, and he would explain to me the benefits of, socialism, free everything. And I thought it was a wonderful idea, like most kids, because I didn't really have a true understanding of how the world worked, how bad socialist policies are, and why America doing the exact opposite of socialist policies led to it becoming the most robust, prosperous country in human history. The first real impactful moment I remember was when Trump debated Hillary for the first time, and I was watching it with my friends. And I just remember laughing and cracking up at everything Donald Trump was saying, and thinking to myself, I have never seen a politician like this before. I don't care that he's not as refined. I don't care that he doesn't have the experience in government. This guy is an American icon, and he is not changing a bit, even though he's running for president. And I've always been a go against the grain type, and supporting Donald Trump at that time was definitely going against the grain, so it fit perfectly with who I was. And the thing that resonated with me the most during that time wasn't really any particular policy. It was his fight against the establishment. It was newcomer Donald Trump versus the perfect embodiment of the deep state, of the establishment, of the swamp in Hillary Clinton. I wasn't brainwashed into believing he was a bad guy or a Russian asset or a racist. I felt as if the way Trump spoke was very resemblant of the way I would speak with my friends or the way normal people spoke to each other. Yes, sometimes we say things a little crass, a little unpolitically correct. But for all of my life, Donald Trump has been an American icon. When I was rapping in high school, Mac Miller came out with the song Donald Trump, and it was a nationwide smash hit. So I couldn't understand for the life of me where this narrative was coming from that Donald Trump was this evil and vile person. So fast forward a few years into his presidency, there were two policies that he had that I really supported. One, lower taxes. Two, accelerated depreciation. Now, this was right when I was starting to make a little bit of serious money in business. So the idea that my taxes would go down, I was thrilled. And number two, I was getting involved in real estate at the time, and accelerated depreciation lets you claim all the depreciation that you would claim over 27 and a half years, year one. So again, great for tax savings. And the second major thing I started really liking about Trump was just his overall attitude and confidence in being the American president. Again, because of my trips to China and Burma, I developed such a pride in being an American. I feel as if I'm a citizen of the modern day Roman Empire. We are the greatest country on earth. We have the richest people. We win the most gold medals. We have the most generous people. We take in the most amount of immigrants, the biggest businesses, the strongest military, pioneered civil and human rights, save the world, patrol the seas, and allow for this free trade, safe and prosperous world order to exist. I mean, why would you not be proud to be an American? But the overall energy before Donald Trump was one of guilt, one of shame. And Donald Trump brought back that pride in being American. There is one moment I will never forget. When Donald Trump, first term, was meeting with the European world leaders, and he shoulders his way to the front of the crowd, and he stands proudly, chin high in the middle. That was a moment that I loved. But it's also a moment where I can at least understand how some people don't like Donald Trump's bravado. You know, some people love when basketball players do all the cheering and flexing after a dunk, and some people don't like it. I can understand it. It's just a difference. But I love that kind of attitude. It was symbolic that America will not take a backseat to anybody. We are the greatest country in the world, and Donald Trump was no longer going to let the foreign order see us and treat us as just a naive open wallet that everybody could rob. But even then, during that time, I wasn't like a massive Trump supporter. For that, you have to fast forward to early 2021. Now, this is funny because this is arguably Donald Trump's most unpopular right after January 6th. But this is when I was in Los Angeles, and on the news, all I was seeing was time and time again, Biden just failing and embarrassing himself. And after the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, I decided I was going to buy a MAGA hat. And even at the time, the MAGA hat wasn't a pro-Trump hat as much as it was an anti-Biden hat. I thought this guy is wrecking America, and the message on this hat is more applicable now than it was when Trump first was running. And I started seeing Biden propose things that went directly against my self-interest. Removing the 1031 exchange away from real estate, all of my real estate investors will know this. Increasing capital gains tax, and the overwhelmingly authoritarian COVID lockdown measures. I was living in LA, which was even worse, but it put an even more sour taste in my mouth for the Democrat agenda. So I started wearing my MAGA hat literally everywhere in public, in the middle of LA, in the height of Donald Trump's unpopularity. And the reason I started doing that was to show my opposition towards Joe Biden. But more so, as Joe Biden's failures started to compile, I wanted to hear from the other side what was so wonderful about Joe Biden. And at that time, because the sentiment against Donald Trump was so strong, if you were a white person wearing the MAGA hat, you might get punched out in public. But even if you don't get punched, you're gonna be called a white supremacist, a racist, and that's where the conversation ends. With me, You couldn't do that. I'm black. You can't call me a white supremacist or a racist. It invalidates your argument, and more than anything, it makes you look ignorant. It makes you look racist. How can another white person tell a black person what they ought to feel, how they ought to interpret somebody's words, implying that black people can't think for themselves and that we need to listen to your white liberal opinion because it's so morally superior. And over the years, as Biden kept making bad decision after bad decision, my ammunition for my talking points only increased. And over this time, I spoke with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people about Donald Trump, about politics. And I gained another critical perspective, which was how people think. When talking to my rich friends and mentors, I started to see how high productive, high income people thought. I started to see how middle class people thought. I started to see how poor people thought. And it was during these 4 years that the Democrat Party started forcing their cultural agenda down everybody's throats. It's cool to hate America. America's evil. America's systemically racist. We should be ashamed of who we are. Trying to enforce a victim mindset on everybody. Trying to tell black people they are lesser than their white counterparts. Trying to tell white people that they're inherently evil because of their skin color. Trying to push for radical socialist policies. Trying to uproot reality and say that men can become women. Losing all sense of American pride and depicting on the world stage that the president is somebody that can be taken advantage of, not somebody that should be respected, someone whose main goal is to appease foreign leaders. Over this time, as I was growing and learning and changing, I knew I was a conservative because my fundamental belief is that the government does not exist to be everybody's mommy. It exists to protect and defend our individual rights and liberties. A government that controls every aspect of your life and tells you what you can and cannot do isn't for free-thinking, ambitious individuals. It's for the people who don't want the burden of being responsible for their individual choices, who are exhausted at the idea of having to be self-sufficient and be in charge of taking care of themselves. I believe people should strive to be self-sufficient, not dependent on the government. So not only did I hate the Democrat policies, I hated the overall weak, guilty, America-hating energy, but I also hated their insane anti-reality, anti-science cultural movement. And over the years from 2021 to 22 to 23 to 24, when I was talking to people, I could slowly see that the sentiment was getting so against the Democrats that Donald Trump was making a resurgence. I would get more nods, more winks, more thumbs up, more secret, nice hat, bro. Because those same things were turning off the majority of people. And this is in deep blue California. Around 2024, I could see that the vibe did a complete 180. I almost never got any negative comments about my hat. It was all positive, from the clerk at the grocery store, to the bouncer at the club, to the airplane stewardess, and of course, to my richest and most affluent friends. That's when I realized, late 23, early 24, that even then, Donald Trump was going to win the election. The problems the Democrats created were so bad, left such a bad taste in people's mouth. They were so unfixable that all the parties, all the racial demographics, were turning against them. And that was the point of me wearing this hat out in protest, was to show people in a deep blue area that other people think like you. It's not something you have to hide. It's not something you have to be ashamed of. I will wear this because I'm self-employed. I can't be fired. I can't be socially ostracized. So I'll wear it for you. And after a while, I definitely started seeing it as a duty that I had, because so many people were telling me they supported it, they agreed with it, but there is no way that they could wear that hat out in public. People wanted to be proud of being an American. People hated having their speech policed. People hated the cultural stance the Democrats were taking. People hated the inflation and ridiculous economic policies. People hated the weakness on a global scale, leading to the breakout of 2 wars. Every single person started thinking this right here. Yeah, Donald Trump said some crazy shit, but my life was pretty good under him. They saw the weaponization of the lawfare. They saw for 4 years the blatant lies from the media, from the medical apparatus related to COVID. They saw their kids fall behind because of these lockdowns. They saw illegal immigration rage out of control, only to be told by the Biden administration that they were crazy. Illegal immigration wasn't a problem. People saw that our government and our country was not being run in a serious way. And people were forced to choose between the politicians that pretend that they're perfect and dignified, but ruin your life, or the guy who says and does things in a rugged way, but actually makes your life more safe and prosperous. And even now, the Democrats continue to take the wrong cultural stances. They criticize Elon Musk when a rocket explodes because they don't understand innovation and advancement. That risk-taking, never give up, if you fail, try and try again mentality is what built America into the powerhouse that it is. All of the ancestors of this country took a massive risk by coming across the ocean from Europe to an undeveloped place and building and creating, embarking into the unknown. We bought the Louisiana Purchase and Lewis and Clark said, let's go discover this place. Let's see what it's about. Unknowing of the risks ahead. Our curiosity, our ambition, our forward thinkingness, our desire to do the impossible is what built the New York City skyline. Innovation is making 1,000 tiny tweaks in the right direction until you get a thing that finally works. And now the Democrat Party is shaming that entire process. That is the exact reason why entrepreneurship thrives in America and not in other countries. Because we have a culture that applauds people for trying, even if they fail. In other countries, people don't try because if you fail, it's shameful. The Democrats are proving to be the very opposite of the American spirit. The Wright brothers didn't discover flight because they drew a schematic in a book, built it, and miraculously it worked. They tried it, it failed. They figured out why it failed. They made some adjustments. The plane flew a little further next time, then it failed. And after a series of those adjustments, those failures, the learning, you get something that works, that brings humanity forward. And the attacks on people doing that exact thing, trying to benefit America as a whole, is despicable to me. I believe in individual liberty and freedom. If you want to work a regular, comfortable job and live a regular, comfortable life, that is your prerogative. But I also believe if you want to work 15 hours a day for 10 years consistently, take huge risks, you should be able to become filthy rich and enjoy the fruits of your labor. Because to get rich in a capitalist society requires you to create something of value that people are voluntarily willing to trade their hard-earned money for. That's it. I believe in strong law and order. You cannot have a prosperous, safe, and thriving society if criminals are allowed to run rampant and do whatever they want. I believe the government should be limited in its capacity, not be the mommy and the daddy to grown adults who can't be bothered to take care of their own lives. We are the most multiracial society on earth. Anybody, no matter your color, no matter your circumstances, can be wildly successful in this country. And the Democrats trying to convince people that that isn't the case is just evil. It is vile to tell the people at the lowest end of the socioeconomic spectrum that they can't change their lives for the better, to strip them of their hope. I think the Democrat goal of creating a racist boogeyman is to keep certain ethnic groups mentally enslaved, strip them of all ambition, and they will be dependents on the government forever, which is what the Democrat Party offers. Free stuff. Vote for us. We'll take care of you. I love America. I love her people, even the ones on the opposite side of the political spectrum. And I wake up every day thankful to be a member of the greatest nation in human history. I know that was long, but I hope you guys got some great insight from this video. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Turn on the notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.